call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss.
Here.
That's everyone.
Okay, tonight's work session topic is Fegis and Associates and PBS reports to the city regarding the self-funded health insurance plan. That I'll turn it over to Manager Lanning.
Well, there have been some questions about our plan, particularly in connection with CCMC. And so I wanted to give you an update, have our providers give you an update for our plan. We have Greg Jones and Garth Rouse from PBS, they're the third-party administrators, and then Chris Fegis and Mike Sirkovnik. I just wanted to say it right, I had to look at it, and they are from Fegis and Associates. They are our brokers.
Along with Pierre Nicolette. He's another associate. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. And so they have a presentation for you. You have a packet in front of you with the same information. They're going to go through that, and then you'll have the opportunity. We have 45 minutes, nothing else scheduled. You can ask all the questions you want. Okay? With that, turn it over to.
So my name's Chris Fegis, I'm the principal for Fegis and Associates.
Yeah, we have a councilman online. Thank you.
Sorry about that. How close do you want me to get on this?
You have to get pretty close on the mic, actually.
All right, I'll get real close. So my name's Chris Fegis. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I've been doing benefits since 1987. I was invited to go ahead and come and talk to the city in Cordova in 1994 by a gentleman by the name of Bill Mead, who was your attorney at the time for, I believe it was labor. So I came and talked to Larry, I believe he was the city manager at the time, and we switched the plan, the city of Cordova to Guardian. So that was about 23 years ago. So I've been fortunate enough to go ahead and do business with you guys ever since. Probably 2013, 2014, we combined the city and the hospital into one plan because they both had Premier Blue Cross. And they were on political subdivision agreements. And that was Premier Blue Cross's idea to go ahead and give municipal coverage to all municipal coverage. So we combined the two, and we were able to then get over 100, and at that point, we were able to achieve and receive our own experience. In other words, what our claims were. So after we were together for 1 year, we had one good rate, and that was 2014. We looked at our renewal from Premier Blue Cross on a community rated pool. So we seen what our claims were. Our claims were a total about $600,000. We paid almost $2 million. And they wanted to give us a push in rates, which is no increase. Well, that was unacceptable. We said, well, we want a decrease. And they said, well, we don't give a decrease. So that's when we looked at self-funding. And the way self-funding works the best is you have to have at least 75 to 80 employees together. And with the city and the hospital combined, it works. And it works well because we're going into our 6th year with no rate increases. Rates have been flat and the same. In fact, we're about 2 or 3% lower than we were last year. I think that's what it comes down to. So with that being said, I don't want to overindulge anything else. I know we only have 45 minutes, but I'm going to turn it over to Garth Rouse now. He can go through this part, and then we'll be as short as possible, and then we'll answer any question that you may have.
So just to reiterate, you've been the broker for the city for all that time, for 23 years?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's great. So, and that's what the broker does.
I had hair.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the time to be able to come up and share with you about your health plan. And so I'm going to go over the slides. You guys have them in front of you, and it's up there behind you. And so I want to go through really basically what is a self-insured plan, so we can have a base to start from. And then we'll talk about the differences between those, and then we'll also take a look then financially where you guys are, right, and what it's looked like since you went self-insured in 2015. So first thing, and again, the end of that is just going to be any questions that you guys have, and I don't think the slides will take more than 15 or 20 minutes, so there should be plenty of time to ask questions, and that's what we're here for. So self-funded plan, what does it mean? It just means that when you're a self-funded plan, you as the employer are liable for paying any claims that come up, right? So you're all aware of how fully insured stuff works, right? With your homeowner's insurance and auto insurance, right? You pay a bill to the insurance company, and then they have to take care of whatever expenses come up, right? You crash your car, the house burns down, whatever, they're on the hook for that. In a self-funded plan, it's just the opposite, right? As an employer, you're on the hook for whatever claims come up. So, employer assumes the risk for paying those claims, which would be a scary thing, except that next slide goes into it goes into stop-loss insurance. So we call it reinsurance. And so basically you're buying insurance on insurance, right, on your insurance product. And what that does is that guards against really expensive claims, more claims than you can bear. And so you'll see on the slide, there's really two ways that comes about. One is specific, on a specific coverage, which deals with any one individual who has claims in excess of a certain amount. And those amounts can be different depending upon what the entity is willing to take on as far as risk. So far, what you have with the city's plan is a $55,000 deductible. So anything that goes past on any one individual, past $55,000. So if I go in and I'm working for you and I've got $75,000, then that extra $20,000 now becomes a payment that the reinsurance carrier pays back once I get past that. So there's the specific deductible, and then there's an aggregate. And the aggregate just means once the plan is paid out a certain amount, then again, as a whole, then it stops and the reinsurance kicks in. And so just so you know, it's a kind of a moving corridor based on the expected claims as a whole. For you guys, it's right around $1 million. You're right at that $1 million. So anything aggregately over $1 million gets reinsured on behalf of with the reinsurance carrier. So this plan, so again, just important concepts to understand with self-funded. This slide goes over, the next slide goes over self-funded versus fully insured. Self-funded plan, again, employer maintains that risk, but you're limited with the stop-loss coverage. The important distinction is plan savings are realized by the plan sponsor, right? Rather than just paying a premium to a carrier and then they walk off if the expenses aren't there. The plan realizes the savings, and again, Chris went over why that was so important, especially at the start, when you find out out of $2 million, they're only paying out $600,000 in claim. That leaves a lot there. Plans, say in the self-funded area, are governed by ERISA law, which is different than state law. And then plans are flexible, and plan sponsors can determine changes. So part of the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, says that if you're offering fully insured plans, you have to cover 10 essential benefits. So essential benefits are hospitalization, surgery, prescriptions, emergency room, those kind of things. Self-funded plans are flexible in that they don't necessarily have to do that. Your plan does cover those types of things because we mirrored it over based on a Premera plan, but you do have more flexibility in plan design, and you have the ability to be able to determine, you own the data that you have within your self-insured plan. And so you're able to maybe take a look at the plans and customize it and customize benefits based upon what you need. So it's a little more, it's more flexible as far as that's concerned. On the fully insured side, of course, you're pulling something right off the shelf. The insurance company profits from the plans, and again, their state law determine that. So next slide, this is just an illustration that goes through, again, how that works. I don't think we need to spend any necessarily time on this, but everything kind of runs through the TPA once a claim comes through. It gets processed through networks, secondary networks, that type of things, and then providers are paid. So those are the differences with the self-funded plan. You understand the basics and the reasons why you would go self-insured. So we're going to take a look at the city plan and take a good look at it, what we did, and is it working, right? Is it working out? We've got several years now with it. First thing is, the instructions that we had when we went to a self-funded plan by your previous city manager was to make sure that the benefits that were mapped over were the same, so that people wouldn't be going backwards, or there wouldn't be any difference in the plans in the plan that you would have versus what you did have. And so they were intended to be mapped over. They were, I think, other than a few glitches maybe at the start, that did happen. A couple other benefits with self-funded plans. There's medical tourism that's been added, secondary RAP networks, and there's a broader national network that we have in self-funded plans. Medical tourism, what that means is that's, rather than if I've got a knee replacement that needs to happen, and you might say go from here to Anchorage to have that done, maybe it makes sense to fly to Seattle or to San Francisco, right, or someplace else to have that done, and that's what medical tourism. The benefit is twofold. One, plans can typically save money doing that. We've seen significant savings for moving people maybe away from an area that doesn't do it as often and is more expensive. So there's a savings for the plan realizes. The other thing is, if we can move people to a place where they do maybe hundreds of those instead of tens of those, then the outcomes are better too. So it's better for the participant as well as for the plan itself. So that's something that we're utilizing with you with this plan. Secondary RAP networks, again, they're providers. You would understand that providers typically want to move people to certain networks where they have the greater discounts. And within our program, we're able to direct to use not just one network, but we can get savings from many different networks. Downside for, a couple of downsides for the way Premier has gone since then. We work with a number of groups up in Alaska. And the last thing is, I can tell you that the last bullet point there is there's very, very high out-of-pocket maximums. They really, really try to drive people to networks, which is great if you have choice and you're available where networks are. But they've really penalized people in out-of-network services. The contracts we're seeing, it can cost people, if they have anything significant done, it can cost them up to $45,000 in out-of-network stuff. So there's some downsides there. Next slide goes into, I believe, goes right into, sorry, they're not numbered. I didn't tell you that. Next slide after that goes into the estimated savings. So this is where the rubber meets the road, and it tells us how has the plan performed overall. So, so as you take a look at this, you can see on that right-hand side, it's laid out for you, the average Premier monthly bill. We know what the Premier rates would be. We get that information from Feegis Associates. They collect that on a year-by-year basis to make sure, do we still have the right plan, right? Or does it make sense to go a different way? And so you can see the average bill, you can see the average monthly self-fund estimate. And so the total savings is right now, and this is over the years, 2015, 16, 17, and 18 through today, you're at about a total savings of the plan overall at $560,000, so a little over $500,000.
Yeah, for questions at the end, or
No, I didn't take them whenever you
just on these bar charts. So these green amounts are the amounts that Premier would have saved over premiums, and they would be pocketing those. Whereas these yellow savings, is that how I'm reading this? Or?
Yeah. So those are the premiums that you would have paid had you stayed on a fully insured plan. That's the cost that you would have. That's correct. That's that green bar is what they would have charged. We're estimating what they would have charged, and I'll tell you why we say that estimate in a minute.
Okay.
But that's correct. So you've got your actual expenses. There's rebates in there, prescription, your pharmacy benefit managers, the program that we have you with. There's rebates that they send out on annually. Actually, do we get those more often than quarterly? Quarterly. We get those quarterly.
I'm trying to figure out why there was such a huge jump from 2015 to 2016. Was that just the insurance market?
No, if you're talking about the expenses, we'll get into that actually when we break down the hospital, the medical center versus the city. So overall, again, and we actually think that 562, we don't have rebates in yet for, I think for the last 9 months.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's about 9 months trailing.
Okay.
About 9 months rebates there, and then potentially a ERO from the
Okay,
utilization.
so we're thinking that actually that number is gonna be closer to 600,000. We think there's another $30,000 there. So overall, when you take a look at the plan over the years, did it save? Are you better off than you were before from an expense standpoint from being fully insured? And the answer is yes. But one thing I do need to, so we're gonna break apart what goes to the city, what part has, what the cities, because we have the same graph for city versus the medical center. But before we get to that, you need to understand that the relationship with the city and the medical center is symbiotic in that you kind of both need each other in order for this thing to work. So if we didn't have you together, if one group wasn't there, this wouldn't be a choice, right? We wouldn't be able to get reinsurance on groups of 50 or less. And so it really is symbiotic in that you kind of need each other. The city needs, there's $600,000 that's saved that you couldn't have saved outside of this program. And so you need the medical center to be a part of that. Medical center needs you in that, as you probably all know, there's been funding issues in the past. And the problem, if you can't pay your bill on a fully insured plan, if you can't get that thing taken care of right away, you get dropped. There's no kind of grace period there. So they need that, and I think that we'll go into their plan savings here in a minute, but, so I just wanted, again, to tie that all together so that you understand, you kind of both need each other in a spot where you really need each other in order to have this option. So the next slide goes through the city plan savings, and so here you can see it's all coming up roses. The actual expenses, when you tie in the rebates against what the Premier rates would have been, and it's every year, you can see the chart down below, 2015, 16, 17, 18, every year the city has saved money over the total over the years. So again, your $600,000 to the good. When you go to the medical center, you can see here that they had 2016 was not a good year, and you can see that down below, the 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Every year has been fine. Some years have been better than others compared to their fully insured premium, but 2016 was not good. There were some losses there that were large, right? And so just so you know, Chris mentioned he went in 80s, he's been doing this since 87. I've been doing it since 89, so I'm coming up on 30 years. And in all those years, watching these kind of things, I can pretty much tell people, you're gonna have good years when you self-insure. And we've seen good years, certainly with the city. And then there's gonna come a year or two where where it's not gonna be good, where things just pop up and that's just what happens. So you really have to, when you take a look at self-insuring a plan, you have to look at it long-term, because long-term, it tends to work out really well, but again, you can get hit with these short-term blips. So unfortunately, the medical center had theirs in 2016. The city's been running fine, but it could happen 2019 or 20 or 21 for the city. So those kind of things do come up. That's why you have reinsurance. But it's an anomaly that does happen every once in a while. So when we look at good years, I always tell people, remember the good years, right? So if you're taking a look at the losses in the market, and boy, it went down significantly, remember the good years that were there, because they do happen. So the plan funding, right now, to summarize this, we can break apart, to summarize this slide, we can break apart the city versus the medical center, because that's the way we've been tracking it. And so really within the plan, the most efficient way and the fairest way to look at this is really as one plan, right? Is covering, because that's really the way that's the way it was brought in. That's how the reinsurance companies look at this, as really one plan. We've been keeping them separate. But that's not necessarily the healthiest way to go as far as the plan is concerned. You really need to consider it as one big plan, because it's hard to strip those out and make it make sense of two smaller plans. So we're working on some things, looking at some trust scenarios and some other types of things that we can do to really treat this as one plan and assign the risks amongst the group in kind of an even fashion. Administratively, there's just two types of bills that the city receives. You get the fixed bill that pays the fixed administrative costs, and then the claims costs. That comes along later, and we say, we've got so much in claims, please fund, and then that's how that gets funded. Last few slides just have to do with some things that we're looking at. We're always looking at ways to save the plan money, and we want to be on the forefront of that. One of the reasons that we got into this business is I think that the only thing wrong with our healthcare today, and it's just from my perspective, is the cost. I don't usually talk to people who have issues with getting, access to care and those kind of things. Usually people get access. So for me, it's all about cost. And so one of the things that we typically want to do is we want to do all we can to make sure to make this as affordable as possible. So we're always looking at ways to cut costs where it doesn't affect the participants, right? Because there's only a couple of ways that people deal with cost increases on my estimation in the years that I've been dealing with this. When costs go up, typically employers either pass on more of that cost to the employees or they adjust benefits, right? Increase deductibles and do those kind of things. And sometimes it's both of those. So from my perspective, overall on the plan, you've saved money. You've been able to keep the same benefits that folks were used to prior to the switch. And you've been able to not increase costs to participants for 5 or potentially 6 years now. And that's, from my perspective, that's unheard of. We just don't see that happen. So again, from my perspective, I think things are going well with the plan. That's a quick report on it. Again, the idea was just to kind of give you an idea of the plan, how it works, and give you a good financial snapshot of the program. Any questions?
Questions? So, as premiums are paid in, is there a reserve fund that's created that pays claims? So in other words, where there's rebates, where are those paid from?
Yeah, so from my answer to that is I don't know how the city and the medical center are doing their accounting. We're asking for fixed cost and for claims cost. So that's where we get reimbursed. So I don't know of any other fund or anything that's set aside other than that. So when you take a look, so to simplify that, when you take a look at what would have been paid out in premiums, right, to Premier, that would have just had to have gone out. That's not going out. What's going out is, again, the fixed cost and the claims costs are coming to us to authorize the payments to the participants and to pay the fixed costs. The difference between that, I think, stays in the organization.
Well, in the scenario you're talking about, Clay, is typically is a trust scenario where you fund to like a fully insured equivalent, like your Premier rates. That way you can kind of handle the bumps. And right now there is no trust in place, so there could be something occurring that's not in our purview. But currently there isn't a trust established. That's one of those things we're working on as well, because we think that's going to greatly improve and mitigate some of those bumps that are occurring along the way and help even out, again, some of that volatility in claims experience.
Yeah, so right now, unless the city and CCMC are making an internal provision to set aside a cash reserve, the year you have that $600,000 hit, you're writing a check for it. Okay, that's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Where do the rebates come from?
So
You're gonna have to talk into them like
Yeah.
the rest of them.
So I can answer that. The rebates come from, the pharmacy benefit manager. So the pharmacy benefit manager that we use sends out rebates based on the usage and other formulas within, basically it's a rebate on the pharmacy costs.
Yeah, so PBMs, they build in rebates built into these in the hopes that, to drive steerage their way. So they've got kickbacks going, and this is all built into the drug prices. One of our mission statements is really about transparency to our clients. And so one of those things that, we've always dedicated ourselves to is crediting that back. Mm-hmm. So that's something we have it built back in. It's credited back to the plan. And the way that it is credited is it offsets claims. So as claims come in, we offset it against claims. It's very difficult in many cases to track those rebates back to who the individual that generated it. It's quite the trail that's intentionally, I think, on their side, a little bit, tricky again to follow. So that in that instance, we apply it to claims, we can apply it to fixed bills, but there is, we're working, with currently with Alan on exactly, how to do that in some scenarios. In some cases, it's obvious. In other cases, it's a little more challenging. And that's where, again, if a trust was put into place, there's, that concern is eliminated, because again, it's gonna fund a general asset or liability that's used to fund future liabilities, so.
Okay, but that's an event, like there's a time, once each year or something, when those rebates come back from the pharmacy. And if you just happen to have claims coming in, you can kind of short circuit and offset those claims with what would have been a rebate.
Yeah, well, we do claims every month, so we always have claims coming in, we always have fixed costs. The rebates come quarterly, it's a little variable, but they come quarterly, but there's always something to apply it against, there always is the case. And so it's almost always better to keep this kind of money in a plan, just to avoid, other issues, where the money come from, who's benefiting from it. So typically our best practice is to always include it in the plan. And that's why, again, we offset against other costs as opposed to cutting a check back.
Questions, council, online?
So the plan savings that we're seeing, that's going back into the general fund then? Are all of the savings going to the general fund, or does some go back to CCMC as well?
No, so again, the difference between the premiums, what we showed as premiums is theoretical, right? Because you didn't pay premiums. We have to compare it against something to say, are we doing better or not, right? And so where the premiums would have gone out before, would have just been a check had gone out. Now we're in the self-funded thing where we ask for, on a monthly basis, we ask for the fixed cost. And then we also ask for the claims cost, whatever claims came in. So it's comparable from the standpoint of, if we weren't in this, what else could we be in, right? And that's, from your standpoint, I think you have to know that, right? You gotta know, well, this was an experiment before. And we don't know the future, right? We don't know what claims are coming down the road a year or 2 years or 3 years from now, so it's something that we always have to watch. But we can definitely say, look in the back, comparatively, you were better off. There's $600,000, right, that didn't go out, that would have gone out if you were self-insured. So it's money that never went anyplace, right? Where you would have sent it off before the carrier, it stayed in the two organizations.
But I think, another way to look at it as well is that the medical center had a tough year. One tough year that honestly, again, when you compare it to Premier premiums that have been quoted on the larger group. So again, they're likely a little bit higher, a little bit low, potentially lower than they would actually be. But the reality is, again, that due to the claims, they haven't come out a ton ahead at this point with the self-funded, if you look at an isolated case, but the city's come out really, really well. And that's where we're saying that, we think a trust is gonna mitigate some of that. If there was a trust scenario in place, there would be reserves, and this is very approximate, we're gonna go back and do some more reporting, but reserves of approximately $250,000 sitting in the medical set for the medical center future claims, and about $350,000 sitting for the city for future claims. So had we had a trust all along, that would be, the situation. But right now, again, you're just paying the bills as they come in. So there's not, the savings are just realized in other ways because you just pay them as they're incurred.
From our standpoint, the way I've understood it since the day I arrived is, if we have rebates that are available during a billing cycle, we apply those rebates to the bill. And then the rest of the funds that are not expended are retained in the general fund with the city.
So just back a little bit to the trust thing. So there's some legal issues with getting an ERISA trust established, and that's what we've been fighting with, because we've been looking at this as a way to kind of mitigate, again, to be able to have the advantages that we need of a trust. The other thing that's been talked about is adding, there's potentially could be other groups that may have interest in coming in. And we want to be careful about that, because we want to make sure we have good groups, right? We want to make sure we're not going to hurt what's going on here. So, but there's no way to do that unless there's a trust set up and to be able to protect those assets. So there's a couple reasons why we have to really kind of pursue that and go further down that road.
So the plan sponsor for this plan is the city of Cordova.
It is.
And all of the, fixed payments and claims payments come from the city. All the rebates and everything go back to the city.
No, we actually, again, we've broken them apart and separated them as if they're two separate groups, which again isn't That's why we can give you the reports that we do. But when we ask for the fixed claims and then we ask fixed costs for the claims, we're asking each place for that. So we'll go to the city for theirs, we'll go to the medical center for theirs. But if we can do what we want to do, it would just be one. We go to the trust.
In a trust scenario, they're gonna get it just like they would a Premier bill, and you pay that, balance every single month, and then you reevaluate going into the next year. So if you built up assets because you've had a good claim year, you evaluate at that time, what do you want to do for the next year? And typically, a lot of times that's gonna come into potentially in the form of modifying plan benefits. So if you've got a certain, a cushion in there and you want to provide additional benefits, there's that way, and then you just consider, how much do you want in there to keep in there for potentially for a high claim year, exactly what level of balance you want to maintain.
And the trusts are federally regulated as well.
Yeah, it's ERISA, which is federal law.
It would be an ERISA trust, and they're fairly, they're fairly common. They're well established.
And then does the federal, are there federal guidelines then for how much kind of percentage of reserve you have to have, and at maximums that you can have, and
No.
There's a lot of flexibility there.
Okay.
So we can certainly help, our goal is gonna be to help make recommendations and help get you to a place, or at least help you understand, how to make those decisions. Because again, we've experienced these situations before. It's a hurdle that can definitely, that we can definitely get over from our perspective. I think, again, some of the stumbling blocks is getting that ERISA trust in, and making that work with, some of your other city requirements. Again, I'm not necessarily privy to exactly why it's been an issue in the past, but again, we believe an ERISA trust should be viable unless there's something, again, that's causing conflict on the city level.
And I think, so we have analytic software that we can apply in your case that really will hone down on your claims and can be a predictive model for what's coming down the road, right? And it uses data from all across the country, all different size groups, to where we can put that information in and predict. And what that would do is it would help us, because if you have a trust and you're building up funds in there, when do you know how much to leave in, right? Or do you use it in a different way? And so again, with some of that analytic software, we can make some really educated guesses on that.
Yeah, and they've won, several actuarial awards for actually the predictive capability. That's been my skepticism of these kind of products, is how accurate can they truly be engaging medical expenses, because most of them are, emergent situations. I mean, it's 5% of your population that's driving 80% of the cost. So,
Exactly.
but it's surprisingly accurate.
Can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
And that was actually my question. You can go back to that slide. Oh, did you see that one?
No, I'll give it to you.
Okay, because that was my question actually. So PBS actually calculates actuarials and goes out and makes those arrangements with, or you have someone do that for you, or?
Yeah, so there's even this illustration belies the complexity that sits behind your plan. I mean, there are a lot of relationships. There's folks that do your that we contract out with to do your pre-certification requirements. There's folks that we contract out with who will run your any claims that come through your primary network and then through secondary networks. There's a lot of different relationships in there. So we are kind of the gatekeeper for that, for all the stuff that happens with the plan. Right, so we make sure that it's run through the appropriate claims processes, those type of things, so that any discounts that can possibly be done get applied. Claims pre-certification folks, when we get wind of that, then we're looking for medical tourism. We have, I know we've saved some significant dollars on air transportation for your group alone. I think we saved 15 grand early on an air transportation claim by being able to negotiate some of that stuff. So again, that's the activity that's behind there, but we're kind of the first stop. When somebody accesses their care, right, they go to the medical center or someplace, then that claim typically comes through us and then it gets fanned down there and gets processed for the best discount it can and then gets paid.
So who's comparing to market, say Premier? Like at what point would, if there comes a point where Premier might make more sense?
Yeah.
Is that something, Vegis is looking at as our broker?
Yes.
So you're kind of doing market comparison?
Every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is CCMC, is this whole plan in network? And are like CCMC, are they primary network and all their providers and everything?
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, they're in network.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay. I would hope so.
yeah.
Councilman Meyer.
Is there any incentive for people to go to CCMC before going to a different
That's a
hospital?
great question, yeah. And so so the answer to your question is, other than in-network, I don't think we have anything special in there other than in-network. But that's one of the things that we're talking about, right? Let's drive them to the medical center. So we're looking at ways to enhance the benefits there to drive people.
Yeah, and you just have to do it a little bit carefully. I mean, because part of the reality is that the medical center could benefit from steering people there, not just on the claim side of things, but also on the insurance side of things. So it could be considered self-dealing. So that's why we want to make sure that we do it. You know, it's something I think can be done, but again, it's got to be done in a well thought out manner.
Well,
You're not, you know.
yeah. And ultimately, you know, there's behaviors you want to try to incentivize, but certainly you can't force. Like, for instance, again, medical tourism. So I'm here, I'm working for you, and I need a knee replacement, and we get wind of that, and so we say, hey, Garth, you know, instead of doing that in Anchorage, maybe we should fly you to Seattle or some other place where the outcome's going to be better for you and it's going to be cheaper for the plan, right? So we can try to incentivize, but if I say, no, I'm going to go to Anchorage, you know, then you can't do anything. Yeah. So we want to, but we do, and it's an appropriate point to kind of incentivize people who are going to use your place. Yeah.
Council, there's a CCMC board question with no objection. Yeah. Could you come to the microphone, please, though, for our councilman online? Thank you.
If this trust is established, is that fully funded by the city, or is it funded by CCMC and the city and then whomever else is?
Whatever entities would be part of it basically would be paying in a fixed amount that would amount to what we would consider, you know, an equivalent rate. So we expect what the expected claims are going to be. We add in all the fixed costs, and then you'll pay it in just like you would be paying a Premera or some other fully insured plan. So yeah, the medical center would pay their own bill and go into their trust, and the city would pay their bill and then go in the trust. And then claims paid, they'd be rather indifferent as to which plan, you know, which employer drove that. It would just be paid out of those plan assets. But again, those rates would be determined based upon, you know, the employee counts you have, the types of employee, you know, family plans, single plans, things of that nature. So again, underwriters look at that to some degree and determine, you know, what should each one fund in depending on their own demographics.
So once the money is in the balance, it becomes a joint balance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So if CCMC has a bad year, the city has to help fund that then?
There should be funding, you know, so once you get to a certain point, there's funding in there that can account for future years. Early on when you get a trust in a place, in a lot of cases you want to fund to a higher level. So in some cases folks will fund 15, 25% over expected claims so that they can build this balance up a little bit quicker. And then yes, the idea is then if there's a shortfall for either one, claims are going to automatically be kicked out of there. So that's kind of the hope, is to help kind of even that out, because cash flow, you know, the medical center can be variable depending on the time of year, and the health plan, it's the claims are incurred irrespective of the time of
That's
year.
what insurance says, right? Right, everybody put in the pot, and the one who gets hit they're the ones that get that reversed.
So if you get another business or two into the trust, again, if they have a bad year, it gets funded out of the trust.
Yeah, and so the idea is that's why you would like to get good risk in, and then you underwrite it. So if you do, you know, have a group that's higher risk, you wouldn't ever want a group with a lot of risk coming in. But if you have a group with higher risk, you can still be managed pretty well, and that you charge them higher premiums. You know, they've got higher groups, and you have underwriters, the folks that are determining the stop loss amounts and expected claims. Those folks will go ahead and tell you, you know, how much that they should fund based upon their risk. And so, you know, you want it fairly similar, and I could go to, you know, I could probably talk on that for quite a while, but yeah, you want fairly similar experience. The more folks you get in, it's going to drop the price for everyone and improve the variability. So it'll start smoothing out even more. So I think, again, the more opportunities you guys have to add potential groups into it, it's just going to create a smoother ride for everyone. And we'll do our due diligence on that, right, on our side to help you make sure that you're adding the right kinds of groups in.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So in the trust structure, then, does the trust build that reserve that functions as a backstop? Or is that still internally accounted for by?
No, the trust builds that. There's trust reporting done, you've got tax filing requirements, and then, potentially audits as well of that trust. So it will be an independent entity that's gonna be protected from bankruptcy and other various things as well. So lawsuits, things of that nature. So it will actually provide additional protection for the assets to offset your future medical liability.
And that can have earnings, I mean, that's invested, the reserves are invested.
Yeah, there's potential.
They
for
do.
it,
That's what
absolutely.
insurance
I mean, there's
companies do.
potential. It's, you've got to be careful obviously how you do it, right? So if you invest in a long-term fixed equity type product,
Yeah, you have to
potentially
cash.
it can work. I don't see people investing it a ton. It really depends on the amount of assets you've got, because you also need cash flow. And that can be the issues with tying it up in the market.
But it can, that's what
But it
insurance
can,
companies
it
do.
definitely can.
They build their reserves and they invest them.
Councilman Burton or Guard, do you have any questions? We got about 5 minutes left here.
I had a question about whether or not we had an audit available for our plan.
We've got full accounting.
yeah, we have.
I'm happy to provide. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean.
I think that's part of the audit that the city undergoes.
Yeah, we provide annual information on the plan every year to the city I'm guessing to audit, some of our work, but we can work at any time. I mean, we reconcile our own work continuously. So, but again, we're happy to provide whatever data if you'd like to look over. It's certainly not a problem.
Well, one of the lingering questions that we have is how much does the health insurance cost the city of Cordova and CCMC, and where and how we arrive at the budget numbers that are in our budget, and
Sure.
We need to see something to be able to track that.
Yeah, so I don't think you have the packet that we have, we've listed out. We've compared the dollars again, on some charts here that we have here against Primera, and taking a look at that, we can come up with some number. I mean, if you have questions about how much should be budgeted, I mean, we can certainly help with that. I don't know how you've done it in the past. I'm assuming it's been kind of based on the old rates, right, on the Primera rates that you have. So if that's the case, then again, the funding for the plan in total is $600,000 to be good.
Yeah, so we have reporting built into this presentation that shows you the aggregate totals of exactly how much has been spent.
Yeah.
You have outstanding liability for 2018, so there's incurred but not reported. So you've got some things that could, still be coming down the pike. But again, this is aggregate. We're happy to provide the full breakdown. Typically, we'll provide quarterly a full breakdown between fixed claims, exactly what vendors are fitting in on a monthly basis. So we've got a very high level of detail that I can provide, at any time to give you just even more depth.
And you can tell it the budget.
Well, the original rate came from the 2015 or
Yes.
2014 Primera
Yes.
rate.
Yes.
They were charging, whether you're a single EE or family, whatever those were. And we have used that rate consistently since that date. Each year when we do the budget, HR has a spreadsheet and they plug in every staff member and their status on the plan, whether it's single or family or whatever it is in between. And that calculates a rate for them annually and then a monthly premium. And then those are calculated. When you look at our budget, you'll see in any line item that there is a health insurance cost. And that health insurance cost is calculated from that number and placed in the budget on an annual basis. And then all of those costs come out of that to go to the fixed costs and then the claims cost. What the difficulty is that when in any given month, as we know that the medical CCMC struggles with cash flow, when they have a $189,000 claims cost in any given month, that's difficult for them to come up with. But in previous months, we've experienced those same things. The city's had a $190,000 claim cost in a given month. I think last month I saw that we had a $7,000 or $8,000 claim cost, but it was paid by a rebate.
Right.
And so when those rebates are available, we apply it to the plan. I think in a manner very much like a trust functions, we just don't have it formally in place. The assets of the plan pay the plan. And the other thing I wanted to mention is our medical tourism. You know, we just did an amendment this year to our medical tourism because we were paying all the costs of medical tourism, including food and a variety of things. So we've pared that down as well, so that, you know, trying to save costs of the plan so it really covers travel costs and medical necessity. And so we do whatever we can on a regular basis. So we're functioning very much like a trust. We just don't have, you know, we've talked to our attorneys, I've talked to our attorneys, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but ERISA presented a problem for us, and we're gonna now revisit that and make certain that in any event, in terms of an accounting function, it's one of the things that you've been asking for a long time, and that is, how do we determine our fund balances and account balances and what's restricted and what's not restricted?
Do you represent other self-funded insurance plans in the state for municipalities or boroughs? Or?
Not municipality.
Not in municipalities, yeah.
If I may, another quick question, Alan.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at the city budget, like you go by line item and you find the health insurance category for each employee or each department, you know, you go city clerk, city manager, planning department, et cetera. You add all those numbers up, all the numbers that we have in there for the budgeted cost for health insurance. Does that equal these numbers that are the total actual expenses on the chart, like for instance, 2018, $895,954.30. Or am I looking at this wrong? I'm trying to figure out how we come to our numbers that we budget for this plan.
Well, again, the number
on that.
The number we budget for comes from the 2015 Premier rate. For example, if you had 3 staff members and they were all family, the Premier rate was say it's $3,000 a month. You'd have to budget $9,000 a month for the 12 months is $108,000. Those premiums are going to be paid, and fixed costs and claim costs are going to be paid out of that line item. If the fixed costs are set, but if the claim cost was less, theoretically, at the end of the year, you might see in a particular line item for a department that they did not expend all of the funds that were budgeted on an annual basis.
And some might be over.
And some might be over.
Some might be over.
On that same chart, loosely, again, it's not gonna be exact, but on that same chart, the 895 that you mentioned, then I would expect that budgeted should be something close to the 994 just above it, and the estimated Premier. That's, again, it's
Yes.
but that would be loosely what you would compare that against.
Do you account that
Okay,
closely?
so is it fair to say, just trying to really get to the bottom of this, because there's been, you know, I've had a lot of questions directed at me from different people and whatnot. So is it fair to say that if there's a savings on the city side, and this could go both ways, of course, if there's a savings on CCMC side, there's a savings on the city side, that is more or less subsidizing the other side's plan in any given year if we're, you know, recirculating rebates back into the plan. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, so I guess the answer would be, it's either you're helping to subsidize, or it's money that's stayed in your budget, right? So like overall, again, back that previous slide, overall, you're roughly, I'm gonna say $600,000 to the good total over the years. So that total estimated savings should be a real savings that stays in your budget, right?
Yes.
It's because it didn't come out in claims and it didn't come out in fixed costs. So that should be, again, over the last 4 years, it should be right around $600,000 that stayed in your budget.
Okay.
And so where it got spent from there is, that's your thing, but yeah.
But the medical center has been paying their own claims, so that it's not, when there's a rebate, and if there was struggle, getting a payment made from the medical center, then it may be applied there. So there is some subsidization that could be occurring if you look at it from that perspective, but it's not, it's not part of the process. So typically, again, the medical center is paying their own claims, so they are funding their own liability. And again, it's been tighter for them from the city, and that the city has, because the medical center has joined the plan and they haven't received as much of a financial benefit by doing so as the city has, it's enabled the city to have the plan. If this plan, if the medical center's not there,
Again, you guys are tied.
there's no self-funded, there's really very limited opportunity to be self-funded without that larger pool. So I just think it's important to think overall.
Okay, and then council, I'll just mention, I'll be sitting down with PBS and Feegis tomorrow morning as well. If you have any questions that weren't answered here, if you push them to me by email, I can ask those as well. Okay, so with that, we'll adjourn the work session, and thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in and explaining the plan to us.